Hello, welcome to The Nation. You're watching Badam News Channel. It's all about you. You're with me, Elena Abla. And in the studio, I have two very special guests. Today, we're talking about social media. And social media is such a wide platform to talk about. So we have the good, the bad, and the ugly, perception versus reality. It's an open book right now. In the studio, I'm speaking to Bobby Varanasi. He is the CEO of Matrizel, a management consulting company. And next to me is Andrew Chow, media strategist, speaker and trainer. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
This will be a very interesting topic. We're talking about social media. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, perhaps, Bobby, you can tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in social media and where have you come?
Okay. I'm a management consultant. What we do primarily is to advise governments on technology policies and development of the entire sector of ICT. As a component parcel, there is business to consumer businesses, right, and entrepreneurs who get involved. And social media over the years has tend to become one of those marketing platforms, outreach platforms. So it is being taken seriously by corporations. So our involvement typically stems from what value social media can create, whether it relates to sales or marketing or consumer insights. So that is our take when it comes to social media, not necessarily from just a pure usage standpoint.
Right, okay. And Andrew, on your hand, in terms of being a media strategy speaker and trainer as well, and one of the persons key in the recently concluded Social Media Week, tell us how you got started in this business.
Actually, I started this current business 10 years ago, solely because I wanted to connect my primary school friends through social media.
Right.
So I succeeded 10 years ago. I connected almost the whole class. Right. But I self-destructed myself a few times. I went from being a civil servant to a retailer, to a matchmaker, and now finally speaker and trainer. So social media, it's dear to me because it's a part of my transformation.
But it has, this is sort of the story of a lot of people these days. Yes. Social media has taken on a new form. It's become a new platform, it's become a new career, it's become a new way of people to make a living as well. So let's talk about social media in, of course, this current climate, Malaysia Baru. Bobby, you're actually originally from India, and Andrew, you're from Singapore. Yeah. And of course, I am Malaysian true and true. And here we have sort of like a robust conversation with regards to Malaysia not post GE14. Let's talk about pre-GE14 and post-GE14. The impact of social media. Social media played a really important role, not just in the GE14 itself, but in our everyday lives. But crucially, it has the capacity to move markets. So perhaps your take in terms of pre-GE14, post-GE14, how has social media changed, or has it changed, or is it still the same? Andrew, let's start with you.
Social media to me is a mirror, and when something happens, we can't blame the mirror. We have to fix what is reality, right? There's no point changing the mirror, cleaning the mirror, because reality is we need to fix something that's within us. So I don't see a lot of difference in terms of content creation in the Malaysia scene. I think before the election, people are angry. After the election, people are anxious.
Anxious, okay.
Right, so both begin with the A. But all said and done, it is a reflection of the culture and the sentiment of the people. Rather than to blame it on social media is just like a thermometer. It tells you the temperature of the engagement. Right. So you have to make a certain decision. The problem is, what decision are we going to make is the crux of the matter going forward. Right. So I don't see a problem coming from social media. It is a reflection of the issues that we've been dealing with. So Singapore and Malaysia have different issues, and when people are angry, they actually write and talk very well. When they're happy, they don't talk so well. Right?
Yes, and it's very typical. As Asians, we are a little bit less conversationally vocal, but we can put forth our thoughts and expressions when it's written down on whatever form, whether it's paper, and right now, of course, social media being the easiest. Bobby, what is your feedback or take on this?
Well, it's a two-way street with social media. You can use it in any which way you want, as a tool or as a sword. So we have not come to the point where it's become a weapon. What we have come to realize that it is an effective tool. And what is the effectiveness is not as much in the responsibility of communication as much as it is in the anonymity of the communicator. And I think pre-GE, we could probably argue that there was a lot of difficulty amongst people perception-wise that they could, openly make a statement, raise an objection, or present a view. And they felt that the social media tools would allow them to, make that presentation. And there is an anonymity to it. It is nothing bad about it, but it allowed a lot of communication to move forward. What it also did on a positive note was to spread awareness. So now, to your point exactly, that it is a mirror, whether we are going to leverage it continually with responsibility or we are going to use it as a tool purely to hide behind a certain facade and remain armchair warriors, I think it's left to be seen. Here I would see a generation divide does come to play. You know, people my age tend to use it a little bit more liberally, yet more responsibly.
Yeah.
But you were seeing today's digital narcissism that's happening amongst the millennials is actually the exits of consumers from social media is the highest in the 18 to 35 age group. The biggest number of sign-ons is in the 35 to 45-year age group.
Right. So why is that? Is there any statistics with regards to why the younger generation, like what you're saying right now, 18 to 35s, are the ones that are actually checking out of social media as opposed to checking in, which is what the perception is?
Yes, there are quite a few analysis around the world. Some of them are aggregated for a region, some of them are global in nature. Primary reason for exits, there are three reasons for exits amongst the millennials. A is boredom. And B is that the whole promise of social media creating new opportunities did not pan out in reality. And this is where corporates come to play. Corporates did try to use social media substantially to create jobs, reduce their recruitment timelines, etc. But it really didn't work because they could not determine whether the information presented by a social media platform is true or inaccurate. It's like almost like looking at a resume and saying, is this true or not?
Yes, I think that is throughout in terms of, I think a lot of corporates are feeling this right now, looking at a lot of people are chasing clicks, chasing likes and chasing numbers and figures, but they are not really representative of what the returns are in terms of the sales.
True, and the third point actually, before I hand it to you, and this is the biggest, I think, challenge that millennials are facing is the emotional turmoil that they go through in the presence of disagreements, of multiple perspectives, counter implications. Usually they tend to go very quickly personal. And so there is a huge amount of agony. It has led to some really inadvertent social, economic issues in other countries, not as much in Malaysia, luckily.
I want to take up a little bit on that. Perhaps, Andrew, you can sort of elaborate on that, because I see a lot of impact that emotionally immature, in the sense where you are not ready for this. How do you combat this? A lot of people grow. I mean, in our older generations, for example, you would learn how to interact, learn how to manage the emotions, whether you like it or not, whether it's a disagreement, whether it's confrontation. But on social media, you don't get to. You either lash out or you retract and take it personally. What's your feedback on this?
Social media is an emotional place.
Yes,
it is not really for people who have a rational mind, right? So mainstream
but
media,
everybody's there.
the thing is that all of us are emotion to some extent.
Yes.
And social media is crowded. When it is crowded, you have a hard time trying to stand out. So today, just now I mentioned about different companies, corporation, not finding the link from their brand to the consumer is purely because social is not a corporate brand essence. You don't find a lot of mission statement, value statement, or even vision statement having the word social there. It's because it's very difficult to connect between brand and followers. Unless you can personify certain things, you speak like a person. There is a personality. So today, social media has too many personality, too many noises. So who are we going to listen to? That is a decision we're going to make. And my mom is on Facebook, right? A lot of young people, if you are born a digital native, you will find it boring. You want to go from mass to niche. So that is the issue now why people are exiting. It's because they want real network. They just don't want followers. They want friends. They want real friends that they can really bare their souls, be authentic, and share about it.
But we have seen that people have used social media as a platform to gain attention, because they are not able to get attention elsewhere, or agreements, or approvals. So it feeds that ego, or feeds that narcissism, as you mentioned earlier, in order for you to feel important, having some kind of meaning. So is this what you are seeing, or is this a changing trend?
Well, it is happening in quite a few parts of the world. See, let's take two examples to kind of illustrate the point, which it cuts positively and negatively. The positive side is, for example, in Los Angeles County and across California, social media is used by the police departments, along with psychiatric helplines, to be able to channel, agony through trolling and through other data services that allow people to identify upfront that there's somebody in distress and there could be unintended consequences, suicides, etc.
Right.
So there's a connection. Now it was never possible earlier. Now social media could be used substantially positively in that direction, right? On the other end, if you're looking at examples of India recently, about seven men were lynched in a matter of 4 days, just because they were presumed to be child kidnappers, because one person saw one man walking with a child and assumed that, hey, they don't look similar, probably he's being kidnapped. And then social media was used to, instantly disseminate the fact that I believe this is a kidnapper, and 7 of them lost their lives in just 3 days. This is the adverse consequence of unverified data points.
Right.
So I think we have to be very conscious of the fact that social media is here to stay, yet how do we deploy it, and what are the positive consequences are much more important to identify. You cannot say let us shut it down, because I think we are too far down the road to be able to pull back.
Let's put it this way: it's past the point of no return. There's no going back to no social media, and it's something that we need to embrace. But how do we then mature with it? How do we evolve with it? How do we manage this? What is your hope that this will evolve into?
I think people speak differently in a public situation and a social situation, or even a private situation.
Yes,
now,
correct.
if you were to put a mic in front of someone on the road, on the street, and ask you, what do you think of this? 99 or 100 people run away. Don't interview me.
Correct.
Nothing to say, no comments, right? But they will go back and they will go on the keyboard and they will type.
Yes.
You know why? Because when I type something on the keyboard, I have no instant feedback. No one is looking at me. The attention is not on me. The spotlight is not on me. I'm shining a spotlight on somebody else, the target of my criticism.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
But when you speak out in a seminar, 20,000 conference, no, you're not going to do that, because the spotlight is on you. You are the originator. So that is a problem. Social media give you the false idea that the spotlight is not on you.
Okay.
So when you think spotlight is not on me, I have no responsibility. I just say as it is, right? It's my media. But nothing is just yours. When you say something, you contributed to a lot of fake news, to a lot of misconception of how things should be done. And that is a problem. We have too many of this until we cannot decide who is right and who is wrong, what is the truth, and what is half-truth.
We spoke about this earlier before coming in, the abdication of responsibility, which social media allows people to do. But we'll take a short breather right now. When we come back, let's talk a bit more about how we hope to be able to see this change for the positive, perhaps.
Yes.
Stay tuned. We will be right back after these messages.
Listen to views of industry captains. Analyze and examine trends and projections. Gain market insights from subject matter experts. BizTalk every Friday, only on BNC.
Brings you the latest in current affairs, lifestyle and entertainment, as well as one-on-one discussions with fascinating personalities. Only on Bernama News Channel.
You're still with me, Elaine Rabla, and in the studio I'm speaking to two very special guests. We have Bobby Varanasi as well as Andrew Chow. We're speaking about social media. We were earlier talking about perception versus reality, the good, bad and the ugly, and how can we sort of grow with this. Bobby, Andrew, you earlier made a very strong point about how behind that screen, this is like the safe zone. It's sort of like, it protects you from everything. When you're behind the screen, everything is possible. You're all powerful. Hence the term keyboard warriors. But in front, in reality, everybody shrinks. Everybody becomes this silent person that just likes to observe. So how do we match this reality versus perception? Everybody has this facade that they create on social media, and when they walk out, they think that they're this person, but they're not.
Well, let me take a shot at it and say that we will never end up in an environment where we will have a country full of clones who behave the exact same way, right? we are again way past
We have
that
movies
point.
that
That's
create
it, right.
that kind of perception.
Yes, and we are far away from artificial intelligence taking over as well. So we will never be clones. So what it means positively is that yes, everyone will be different perspectives, different opinions. I think as a nation collectively, we have to only figure out what is the conscience of the nation and what is the impact of behavior of that collective conscience, which is all the citizens and everyone who lives in the country, for example, right? If there is a certain stance, and whether you call it conservative or liberal, doesn't matter what is the spectrum, if there's a certain stance the nation takes, then that stance comes with accountabilities, whether it is in presentation, whether it is in articulation, or whether it is in holding back. I think that level of understanding has to permeate across the nation. Yes, you can argue that today it usually starts in cities and somehow tends to stay back in the cities. It's not going too far and wide out in terms of that learning or that ability to learn. It's an individual accountability. All you and I can possibly do is be one of those many channels to disseminate the positives around it.
I think I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier before we came on the show. Who is going to educate who? Because that is essentially the big question. Everybody has the responsibility or is supposed to be accountable. But I use the word supposed to be because it's not done.
It will not happen. And this is why, in civilized society, what we ended up doing was to create governments and we've created governance, right? Which is followed by a set of rules that are generally acceptable principles of collective behavior.
So for this, who is going to be the moderator of
We
the
are the
entire
moderator.
social media?
We are the moderators.
To
We
what
are-
extent can we sort of like...
Well, we tend to elect our representatives like we have recently done.
Correct.
And these are our representatives who are our collective representatives of our collective conscience. So I think we can channelize our expectations, and of course, in return, we have to expect back accountability. And I think that's when a nation and its citizenry can cohesively work toward. I don't think there is any other alternative around it. Otherwise, we would end up becoming, what I would call ruleless species. It might be difficult to control.
Correct. I agree. It's a combination of two things. One is the rule of the law, and another one would be the culture. So culture is really transparency, and rule of the law would be control. So it's like a seesaw, right? When you have a lot of control, you have less transparency. So we need to find a balance. So it's really culture-centric because the way social media is being carried out and all the happening is very different in Malaysia compared to Singapore, right? We don't have a lot of angry posts. All right,
No.
we are essentially very mellow, right?
Compared to Malaysians.
Yes, very mellow. So you look at the influencers now in Malaysia, they are so creative. Well, you cannot find many of them in Singapore, right? So we are a small nation, but we have evolved in different phases since independence.
Right.
So in Malaysia, it's all along one government, one party government. So I think it is a good thing that now there is an awakening. Now there's a change. And whenever you have a turning point, when you are driving, when you switch from first gear to second gear, your car is temporarily out of control for that split second.
Right.
So we are in that crucial phase now that when we look at it, we just have to find the right gear to move forward.
Right.
So everybody do not know what to do. No one is going to come out and say, let's do this, right? So this is the first time for everyone.
Right.
So I think it's a good experience. Rather than to discuss how we're going to know what to do, let's enjoy this and learn together. I think the word is really learning together because whatever happened here, all right, it won't be duplicated in elsewhere.
Exactly.
And then you cannot find another example in another country to tell us what to do. We have to figure out together, even though I'm a Singaporean, but I think it's a fun time for Malaysia.
Right.
This is the most exciting time.
It is. I mean, being Malaysian, you watch all the conversations that are out there, the narratives that are out there. I enjoy that there's a little bit more voice that people are willing to now express. Perhaps there was a little bit more sort of like conservatism. I don't know whether it's conservatism, but a little bit more fear of speaking out or holding back. But now people feel that, okay, I need to say something. But that's a start. That's a start, like you mentioned, perhaps of the balancing act of how much and how little. So right now, like you mentioned, we need to be the moderators of the how much and how little, the push and pull.
Yeah, in fact, in the term social media, I think we've gotten caught up in the word social for a long time. The media is a much more important and a more, I would think, balanced element in there. Think of it from the dawn of journalism, right? And you are one of them. You know it. There is the recipients of news or information were, you know, a one-way street or sitting on one side of the equation. They were recipients of information that you have painstakingly been able to collect and analyze and validate and then present, right, using a certain media channel. Today it's the television and social networks. Yesterday it was the newspapers only. No participant who was at the receiving end had as much of an opportunity to contribute back, whether it is in terms of opinions or disagreements or disapprovals. At the most, some conscientious people ended up becoming editorial writers or would contribute at least once a week, right? But today, just expand that universe, everybody is a potential contributor.
Yeah, hence when we were talking before we came on the show, Gerard was mentioning with power comes great responsibility. Yeah, it's like a superhero statement, but it is true. Right now, we, you, I, anyone who has access to social media has the power to influence in a sense where persuade, share that information, and hence that responsibility falls on each individual person to make sure that the information is verified, that if you were to disseminate it, it is something that you will stand for, you will vouch for, and if they come for you, you can prove that this is something that is sourced legally, legibly. So, which comes back to, you know, those fake news act that was in place.
So the consequences and the reason for this fake news act, if you look at it very dispassionately, it's not just about Malaysia. Many countries have instituted it in different forms and manners. Is that when you start communicating to a general public or a larger society that is outside of your direct control, which is your family typically, right? The responsibility is that you are retaining social harmony. That's the cultural piece you're talking about. The harmony is defined in each country differently. We define it in a certain way. The Americans define it differently, right? Within the context of harmony, if a certain media outrage or an outlet is not responding to it effectively or not complementing that harmonious requirements, then it becomes a breach of public trust.
Yes.
So a law like the Fake News Act or some of the prevention of whatever, right? It is coming, it's driven by that innate understanding that all our citizens have elected our representatives to keep us safe and to keep us harmonious. So therefore, it becomes paramount for you to ensure that it is implemented and that public trust that we have reposed in you is not breached. Eventually, it becomes criminal breach of public trust. So we don't even want to get there.
Essentially, information is reciprocal. If you were to share it and you were to receive it, you have the responsibility on both ends. Now, let's talk about what you foresee. That's future trends. You know, what is this going to turn out into? I mean, we have been sort of in the most exciting times. There's so much technology. There's so much change. How do you foresee this going forth? Andrew?
For Malaysia, I think things will only be better, not worse, because I think Malaysia has seen the worst.
Yes.
But I feel really is that there'll be a lot more user-generated content out there. There's a lot more engagement out there. So if you post something, you got to expect engagement, right? So there is nothing wrong with ministers making a speech, making a statement on Facebook page. You're going to expect engagement, you're going to expect feedback, and we all wired sometimes to be negative on social media, right? So the fact is social media, but a lot of us think of it as media social, and that's a problem. It's social first, and media now become like an aggregator. Okay, we're going to listen out there to actually see what do really people want going forward. I think we need to have some form of people who are designated influencer, both to be the social moderator, if I may use the right word, is to listen and feedback to the right channel. So, and it is the same way how brands appoint ambassadors. You go out there, you listen to the customer, and then you come back and tell us. I think the Malaysian government will need to do that.
For a nation and a country, I think that's a very tall order to place. Bobby, what's your thoughts on this?
I would take a slightly different take. I'm not disagreeing with you. I would rather look at it from a standpoint of an individual citizen. What does a citizen do in a given day? He's part of a society. He contributes to society, right? And in return, he is also being rewarded by the society. That typically takes an economic view, right? So there's an economy. So it's a socio-economic construct. You cannot separate the two. So when we talk of social media, we sometimes tend to talk only about the social consequences of that. I cannot separate the two. Now, when I'm looking at both, an individual's economic benefits are directly proportional to an individual's social contributions.
Right, correct.
I think today, in today's day and age, we are able to stitch these two immeasurably together. So in that context, when I see what Malaysia has done or accomplished in the last 2 months and what it hopes to accomplish, is that there will be an innate emphasis on inclusivity. I believe that's where the nation is going. But it will come with a mutual accountability on both sides of the spectrum, the receivers and the enablers, socially and economically. And therefore, a man cannot sit on the sidelines anymore and wait for benefits to accrue on him or her. He or she will have to necessarily contribute either economically or in effort terms. And only then be able to benefit socially as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. It's been a really interesting conversation. I think if I were to sum it up, I would say that in order for it to, for us to move forward as people, as nation, we need to care what we put in as much as what we take out of it.
That's correct.
It's got nothing to do with, you know, waiting for something to happen because someone else has been put in place to be responsible for changing our fates. We are the makers of our own fates.
Precisely.
Gentlemen, it's been an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Bobby,
you.
Andrew. That's all the time that we have on The Nation. Thanks for staying with us to the end of the show. Bye for now. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Don't move anywhere.
Lama tak macam ni kan? Ya. Jom kita selfie. 1, 2, 3.
Nine 11 menampilkan pelbagai segmen menarik khas buat anda. Saksikan 9/11 setiap Isnin hingga Jumaat 9 pagi. Hanya di Bernama News Channel.
Gain insights from the people with the capacity to translate vision into reality. Interviews with corporate leaders at 8:30 p.m. Monday, only on BNC.
Brings you the latest in current affairs, lifestyle and entertainment, as well as one-on-one discussions with fascinating personalities. Only on Bernama News Channel.